I think the Prime Minister's interview, I think that's pretty much something that everybody has covered on their front page, is stable government with a decisive mandate, reason for reform, says the Prime Minister. The Times of India says, keen on consensus. The Prime Minister calls for G20 unity, says talks to end conflicts. What do you have there?
Well, here it is about on the Pakistani-China angle. PM discards Pak-China objections on G20 meetings in Kashmir and Arunachal. This is what it says, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi dismissed objections raised by China and Pakistan over G20 meetings that are going to be held in Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh, and said that it was natural to hold such conventions in every part of the country. Ours is such a vast, beautiful and diverse nation. When G20 meetings are happening, isn't it natural that meetings will be held in every part of our country, said the Prime Minister when asked by the PTI in an interview on the eve of G20 summit about some neighboring nations objecting to venues of some of the ministerial meetings. Now,
what are those venues? What are those venues? Wait, I know for a fact that China did not want Arunachal or Srinagar to be a part of it. Pakistan did not essentially like it, but well, hey, a venue is a venue, and India is going to do it their own way.
It's not about venue. I mean, who are these nations to speak about our territorial understanding of what our country's territorial integrity is all about? I mean, Arunachal Pradesh in no far sense of claim can be part of China, and China has been a very big irritant on it. That's, I think, fact remains.
The latest map row was
completely on
absurd.
And then you're asking us not to over-interpret it, and then
how? That response was equally absurd than the inclusion of Arunachal Pradesh in the accession and the map.
The very fact remains is that you have drawn 9 dashed lines that claim the whole of South China Sea, despite of several nations around it. And then you have a 10th line that has been drawn next to Taiwan, where you already have an issue with them. Then you have claims in others territory like the Japanese islands as well. So if you can go ahead and assert yourself where you think is territorially required, I think we can also do that, because you are building artificial islands over there and just going ahead and making your claims. And with regards to Pakistan, I don't know if Pakistan even has that voice to even raise. Where is it? Not even a country to in fact raise a voice on this matter. So I think, I mean, the Prime Minister was very much in the line saying that Pakistan and China, both of them, need not in fact look into this matter.
Absolutely.
It is part of our country. Basically, we're saying it's part of our country, that's it.
I'll just read out a couple of quotes from the Prime Minister's interview. The Prime Minister says, we recognize that we all have our positions and our perspectives on various global issues. At the same time, we have repeatedly emphasized that a divided world will find it difficult to fight common challenges. Now, every now and then, the Prime Minister in the interview, he kept on bringing up Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He said that the theme is, one world, one family, one nation. That's the theme of this G20, and he's also called for G20 unity. Let's not forget, he's already going to be, traveling, and he's going to land in Delhi on the 8th of September and directly get into the G20 process. He's already traveling elsewhere, and throughout the year, from Papua New Guinea to the United States, the Prime Minister has gone out and made sure that he puts across this idea, this vote of confidence when it comes to unity, global unity, and rewriting the world order. See, he says post COVID-19, the world is a completely new place, boss. You got to be, looking at things in a different way. There's a new world order, and India is somewhere dictating that new world order now, isn't it?
See, India has always been playing a very positive role when it came to international ties. One of the biggest issues from the world actually being completely divided up was that India had this idea of non-alignment movement. I mean, at that time, it did serve its purpose to the point where, there were these buffer nations that were there between two Cold War allies or two Cold War rivals. And what happened was that these buffer zones did make kind of sense when it came to be the third bloc of the world. And most of these new colonially free nations stopped from being part of either the Soviet camp or the American camp, and they didn't have weapons coming up from both these superpowers there. So India does make a very positive role. Post-COVID, especially in G20, India is as you probably said, India, I wouldn't say dictating, but India is guiding kind of a principle on the fact that, it is not no longer a world that can afford to be closed. We are all connected. At the end of the day, everyone requires help. We're talking about supply chains that was heavily focused on China. Now we are talking about breaking up that supply chains to have resilient supply chains that doesn't get shut down all of a sudden from if there is a pandemic kind of a situation because it was emerging from one country alone. So all these aspects is being looked into it. Trade, for example, has changed, its dimensions have changed post-COVID. You know, there are a lot of these trade wars. What people don't understand is when it comes to Europe and United States, there seem once in a while there is these huge trade wars that happen between these countries, and you know, they ban a list of items on their side, and the Europeans do it on the other side, the EU does it on the other side. So when he was talking about G20 and about this unity, he was looking at that. Boss, listen, we cannot keep having this change, domestic changes, trade changes, all of, you know, keep happening. There should be some guiding principle by which you're going. So he's probably pushing in for that as well.
A mid-20th century approach can't serve the world in the 21st century. So our international institutions need to expand their decision-making forums. And you know,
that is, he was directly talking about Security Council.
A solar coalition is something that the Prime Minister has given birth to. The Prime Minister has also given birth to, this time they're saying, which is also likely on the cards, is a biofuel coalition, where nations are going to be urged to take step towards decreasing their you know, carbon footprint. And on top of that says, India pitches for African Union in G20. Global South focus, which is already a success for India. After that, India pitches for African Union in the G20.
Well, that's also interesting enough. One of the factors being is that India has been trying to expand its footprint in Africa. Africa is not something that, you know, is away from India's foreign policy sphere as long. It has a deeper engagement over there. China has
because the Greater Africa Union is also a debate inside the African Union as well.
itself. Yes, but you know. This was thought about a long time ago, you know, with the time of Gaddafi and, you know, the other prominent leaders from Northern Africa. They tried to, in fact, go ahead with the idea of African institutions, like wholly looking into Africa. But that did not materialize. Also, in a wholly having an African representative in every sort of decision making. Now, the Prime Minister over here is clearly indicating about the Security Council as well. What he said is exactly correct. This is not the reality of mid-20th century. That is just after the Second World War. The entire United Nations is actually reflective only of that reality. That reality has changed. We have gone away from the Second World War. There are nations that have emerged from colonialism. They have become powerful nations, and the reality needs to be looked into. And as of now, the United Nations doesn't in any way reflect the reality of what the world has come. It's still holding to that mid-20th century. So the expansion of the Security Council is something that the Prime Minister has been asking, India has been asking for a long time, and it would be represented only if Brazil, Germany, India and South Africa is there on that decision-making body.
Certainly, certainly. And you know, even as Delhi, the entire national capital is being drilled completely, you know, for the G20, from highways to health centers and railway stations, you know, smaller cities too having to do a dress rehearsal for G20. Stable government with a decisive mandate, reasons for reforms, says the Prime Minister. Warns against populism, irresponsible policies, says no room for casteism and communalism by 2047. Now, ahead of G20, says global bodies must recognize the changing reality, is what the Prime Minister is saying. New world order is taking shape post COVID-19, exactly what I was telling you, Varghese. So let us circle round to the actual point. Why do you think the Prime Minister gave the PTI an exclusive right ahead of G20, talking about a new world order? I mean,
see, the Prime Minister
there is
probably
no
laying the theme
dearth
for
of you know, outlets where the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but the fact remains is that PTI, of course, being a wire agency and everybody having an access to it, it's not that everybody is going to drive in for an exclusive with them. But he wanted to set the theme for it, and therefore he probably chose that press agency for that factor. And after choosing that press agency for that factor and actually giving out that aspect of it, he was actually you know, laying the grounds for that theme. That is, the theme is you need greater unity. You need to reflect the new realities of the world's multipolar system. You cannot hide any longer from that fact that the world has become multipolar. You have to also understand that in a post-COVID world, we have realized that how our economies, our people, our travel and communications are so integrated that you cannot break away from it. There can't be artificial boundaries drawn in this factor. So he's actually laying all those themes out there.
Another theme that one has to touch upon is the Prime Minister has discarded Pakistan and China's objections on the G20 meetings in Kashmir and Arunachal respectively. Says by 2047 India is going to be a developed nation winning battle against its poverty and corruption. India means business, will lead in health and education sector, positive impact of the presidency. The Prime Minister says the shift to a human-centric approach has begun globally. This is not a GDP-centric, he received questions from the PTI's editors about the GDP, but he constantly said that this GDP-centric view of global progress, this has to change. It has to be more human-centric. So the shift to a human-centric approach has begun globally. We are playing the role of a catalyst. India's G20 presidency has sowed the seeds of confidence in countries of the so-called third world, and India is turning out to be that guiding light for all the developing nations now.
We are, in fact, we are that success story. Most when you look at a huge nation that's come out of a colonial pillage, we are now confident on standing on our feet. Years of work, institutional building. We are now technically reaping the benefits of what the constitutional planners, from 1947 have been viewing, and then the subsequent prime ministers who've been taking forward right now up to Prime Minister Modi. We are actually having that kind of a confidence right now to stand at a global stage and speak about it. But when it comes to GDP and human-centric growth, I think there was some kind of idealism in the Prime Minister's, approach to it. Though he said human-centric growth, the fact remains is that GDP is going to govern a whole lot of aspects of it. But I mean, I understand that humanist approach that he was trying to, in fact,
look at this, because you can't not look at it under the political lens. Fiscally imprudent policies and populism affect the poor, says the Prime Minister.
See,
so
populism
already, in 2024 Lok Sabha
elections. See, populism is something that, I think if you ask any person who has an understanding of conservative economics, he would say populism tends to bleed the state's exchequer. So you can point out to what's happening in Venezuela, nations that kept on spending on the people on a level that tend to, in fact, I have my own debate on it, but I think that is what he was trying to, in fact, raise the issue about how certain aspects of populism tends to keep people trapped within their economic situation, not giving that mobility required or that motivation for mobility. Now, this is the argument that is put forward. I have a different argument to that completely, but anyway, this is what is being, but this is actually conservative economics that is being pushed out also.
All right, and even as we're talking about how the Prime Minister has basically, responded to Pakistan and China's Arunachal and Kashmir claim, the United States President, Joe Biden, he's come out and he's given a reaction on Xi Jinping's, absence, a potential absence at the G20, uncertain that, Xi Jinping is going to come for the G20 meet or not. Joe Biden, the United States President, he's given us a reaction. Let's quickly play that out.
Have you heard that Zelensky has replaced his defense minister?
Yes.
Do you have any comment?
Not
And are you disappointed that President Xi is not going to the G20? How do you explain that?
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see him.
Well, so you see, the United States President is disappointed, and for all the arrangements that we've made here in the national capital, I mean, we're all disappointed as well. The Chinese leader should have been here, and he should have taken part in the G20 summit. He was also speaking to the Prime Minister on the sidelines of the BRICS summit.
Just, while you were saying this, Kabir, something just struck me. Just read it in this context. You have a G20 summit that's happening, and you have the supplementary summits that were happening much earlier, especially in venues like Jammu Kashmir and
the tourism summit,
the
B20 is
B20 is also happening. Now, in that, some of those venues were in Jammu and Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh, and then you have the Chinese releasing a map, and then you have Xi going to the BRICS, but not coming to
Talking
G20.
about disengagement on the sidelines as well.
On the sidelines as well. So, if you read everything in context, it looks like the Chinese are in a disappointed mode. Of course, who cares for their disappointment at the same time? They seem to be disappointed on the fact that India has been harping on the fact of its territorial integrity, and I think they wanted, before the G20, they just wanted to assert themselves.
All I know
and
is
but
that with the kind of
Pakistan is
arrangements,
just piggy banking, by the way.
kind of arrangements that we've made, I mean, it's certainly something to miss out for.